Diplomacy is an art that connects the world politically and socially. It also helps maintain peace and harmony. On the other hand, it strengthens the economic ties between nations. Joining with us today on Diplomatic Faces is Her Excellency Tanya Honkrijp, the Netherlands Ambassador for Sri Lanka. Your Excellency, we're indeed honored, privileged, and happy to have you with us on Diplomatic Faces. It's been a long journey ever since you started. And there is a wealth of knowledge and experience that you have gathered. How is it that you were inspired to take up diplomacy?
Well, I think it already started when I was young. I have a very strong sense of justice, and as a young girl, I found it difficult to understand that people were actually fighting and in conflict. And for instance, news items on starvation and war really impacted me a lot. And I had this idea that I would become a doctor and go to countries where there are limited healthcare services and help people. But when I grew older, I also understood that relations between countries are more complex than they seem, and that I would have to find a different way to actually contribute to the world. And I think for me, diplomacy is a good way. As you mentioned, it's an instrument to maintain relations and good relations between countries and peoples, but also to contribute to peace, prosperity, and security in the world.
So it's all the positivity that we've spoken about. But when you look at different professions and different roles that you play, there are many challenges that people face. So as a diplomat, what are the challenges that you have faced, and how have you overcome that in the foreign service?
I think there's one huge professional challenge when you are a diplomat, that you have to actually change positions. You take up a new position every 3 to 4 years, but also not just a different position, but also in a different country, in different teams, and also working on different themes. And that is challenging, but it's also hugely interesting and satisfying. But it takes a lot of time to get used to that. And I think related to this professional challenge is the personal challenge, and that is that I'm not alone. Okay. I bring my husband, I bring 2 children, and they also have to get used to and adapt to the new surroundings, the new schools, new friends. My husband gave up his job in the Netherlands twice already, and then you just have to hope that you will be able to settle down in a new country, in a new culture. And yeah, it has both difficult sides, but also beautiful ones.
Definitely. And when we speak of challenges, Your Excellency, there's a saying that God created Earth and the Dutchess built Holland. True to the saying, 1/3 of Netherlands was underwater a few centuries ago. But it is quite remarkable to know that the people and the governments of Netherlands has come together in building bridges, barriers to mitigate this situation of rising water. On the other hand, Your Excellency, we know that the climate change that is taking place globally, it is a challenge for the globe itself. We have volcanoes being erupted, the ice caps melting, and then the heat waves. So with all of that, how do you see Netherlands mitigating and managing this in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a huge challenge, and we feel that in the Netherlands, being for a large part almost 1/3 under the sea level, as you mentioned, but also for another part of our kingdom in the Caribbean, the small islands. So we see similar challenges in the Netherlands as like in Sri Lanka, and I think that makes it also so important that we tackle these issues together. You mentioned the rising sea level, the drought, too much rain. There are different issues that have a different impact on our countries. And Netherlands, we try to both tackle climate change, but also, as you said, you have to adapt and also mitigate the consequences. We have questions like, indeed, are our dikes strong enough? And the drought actually is also impacting the quality of the dikes. So these are all kinds of new challenges that we have to face and are tackling. It also makes us a very innovative country. And this innovation, with this innovation, we work on our, of course, on our energy transition, for instance, but also on circularity and sustainable agriculture. And this knowledge and experience and expertise, we also bring it to other countries. So we share it with countries like Sri Lanka. We have a climate and development fund, but we also support countries in climate adaptation, climate smart agriculture, for instance, but also climate or nature-based, I should say, infrastructure.
I guess the credit goes out to the government and all the citizens in supporting this cause. Now that you have been in different countries and served as a diplomat, how does it feel to be in Sri Lanka and serve Sri Lanka as the ambassador for Sri Lanka?
Well, it's an honor. It's really, really nice to be here in Sri Lanka, and actually for many reasons, but I will mention a few. First of all, as you know, our relations go long back, till about 1600. And since then, of course, a lot happened. But it's very interesting as a Dutch person to walk around in Colombo, in Gaul, in Manar, where I was a few weeks ago. And I still remember very vividly the first time when I walked into the Wolfendale Church in Colombo, in Petta, because it was so strange, but also a very nice experience to walk into a church that is actually fully Dutch in its architecture, its design, even the organ, you know, the sound of the organ was Dutch. And at the same time, you're in different surroundings, in a different culture, in a different climate, with different people. So that makes it very, very interesting. Of course, it is a very nice island with rich culture, very rich culture, and just beautiful nature. So I enjoyed it a lot. And last but not least, the Netherlands, I think, has added value in Sri Lanka, and that makes it also so interesting to strengthen our ties and to use our knowledge and expertise to work together with Sri Lankan actors, the government, businesses, also civil society and knowledge institutions, to work towards a more sustainable and inclusive country.
I'm glad you're enjoying your stay, and definitely I hope you get more and more opportunities to travel, to see the culture values in, just like you mentioned, and to enjoy the hospitality of Sri Lanka. And Excellency, as you very correctly mentioned, Netherlands has been a great influence in the legal system, the architecture, cuisine, lifestyle, and some of the facets of political system. So how is it that you intend to promote this further in Sri Lanka?
Well, indeed, we see, as I also mentioned in the example of the Wolfendale Church, we see the influence of the Netherlands and the Dutch period everywhere in Sri Lanka, which is very interesting. I think it's important also to recognize that this has positive and negative sides. Sri Lanka is not only, or I should say the Dutch period is not only about Dutch forts and Roman Dutch laws and Dutch names. This period also implied slavery, colonial violence, and trade monopolization. I think it's important today that the current relationship is based on friendship, on reciprocity, And in this relationship, we see a lot of opportunities to work together, also based on the values that you mentioned. For instance, the values that we share is working towards sustainable development goals, and that's hugely important, especially also if we think about the climate change we just discussed. Working towards the SDGs means that we see a huge potential for Sri Lanka to, as I always say, become the preferred sustainable choice in the region. This can make Sri Lanka very attractive if you think of ecotourism, but also sustainably produced spices, tea, and let's not forget garment, of course. So this is one area we would like to work in with Sri Lanka, because we feel that if you balance profit, planet and people, that's actually the only way to be also economically viable and sustainable in the future. Actually, in the same area where we also have a lot of expertise is agriculture, sustainable agriculture. The Netherlands is the second largest exporter of agricultural goods in the world. And we can use this experience and also the mistakes we made along the way to help Sri Lanka produce more sustainably and also be more productive in the area of agriculture. And we've done so in the past, and we will continue doing so by trainings, organizing webinars, organizing fellowships. So that's another way, agriculture. Then, of course, we also, as the Netherlands, promote universal human rights worldwide. And in Sri Lanka, but also to end violence against women. And as a woman, I also find it hugely important to support women in Sri Lanka, to actually, if possible, provide them with a platform and make their voices heard, because there is a huge potential. There are many well-educated women, and it's really important that Sri Lanka makes use of this potential, not only in business, not only in government, but also in parliament. So that's one area that I'm also very say personally attached to work in. And let me not forget to also mention the work that we do in the cultural scene. We find it very important that people are connected, and one way to do that is via tourism, but also via cultural cooperation. Of course, we work to preserve the cultural heritage for future generations, but we also support contemporary art and artists. So many ways where we try to have, as I mentioned, added value, but also, and that's important, it's also about exchange. It's not a one way. So also, it's also important to learn from Sri Lanka, Sri Lankan experience, and from Sri Lankan culture.
So, having said all of that, this year marks 70 years of diplomatic ties between the two countries. And we've heard that there is a series of events lined up to strengthen and to narrate the shared history, the current relationship, and also the future possibilities, opportunities that the two countries can share. Could you also please enlighten on the importance of these events?
Absolutely, yes. Like 70 years diplomatic relations is a very nice opportunity to actually ask more attention for the relations than you already do on a daily basis. And I think it's also nice because I mentioned the people-to-people contact, and in that context it's very interesting that we want to and do already work together with the Sri Lankan embassy in The Hague on this, because we have to do it together in the end. So we organize activities and foresee activities together. One of these events is coming up. It's a webinar on sustainable trade and investment. It's about the opportunities of trade and investment in both countries. And I already mentioned the importance of the fact of being sustainable and the opportunities there. We will also have another webinar on sustainable agriculture and sharing our experiences. And actually soon we will also publish a call for proposals on sustainable mobility. As you know, in the Netherlands, people cycle a lot.
Okay.
I used to hardly use my car in the Netherlands. I used to bike to go to school, later to go to work, to bring the kids to school, to do my groceries. And we feel that there's a need for more cycling here as well. It's healthy, it's cheap, the Dutch like that, but it's also good for the environment. And it actually, of course, causes less traffic congestion. But it's difficult. You need the right infrastructure. It needs to be secure, of course. So we would like to both help and stimulate Sri Lankans to cycle more, because all the Sri Lankans I know can cycle. So it's not just a Dutch thing. This is something that Sri Lankans also do. And this call for proposals is about cycling to work and how you can stimulate cycling to your office or organization. So it's about home, work, cycling traffic, and how to stimulate that. So that is something important to do. And of course we will also organize cultural events, academic exchanges in the coming month.
I'm sure the collaborative initiatives taken by both the governments will definitely strengthen the growth of our countries. Having said so, we've also heard that since of lately, Netherlands is a popular destination for Sri Lankan products such as food and manufactured goods. How do you think that we need to strengthen the trade relationship between the two countries? Or what needs improvement on that?
I think there are several ways, and it's really in line with the message I already mentioned. In Europe, the demand for healthy, organic, sustainably grown products is growing. And there is an opportunity for Sri Lanka to jump in. Trade more and more revolves around quality, sustainability and transparency. And there is an opportunity for Sri Lanka to be a front runner here, to be an early adapter and show that if you have a high level of produce, and that's already the case, if it's grown or made sustainably, thinking about the environment, the people who are actually producing it, do they earn a living wage? These kinds of questions are already on the top of many producers and business men and women in Sri Lanka. And if we just can push it to the next level, but also showcase it, then Sri Lanka will be an even more attractive trading partner for countries in the EU. And it will also more and more become a condition for trading. So the EU is working now on laws to restrict the import of products that have what we mentioned that do harm in their production, like thinking about child labor or environmental harm, etc., etc. So there we can definitely work on in the future, and are already doing that. We also have to, of course, think about trade is also about access and good access to markets. And for the Netherlands and the EU, it's not an issue that we have a trading deficit with Sri Lanka. However, with the current in the current situation, it is difficult to convince Dutch or European operators to actually import from Sri Lanka, because they also know it's difficult to export to Sri Lanka. So, of course, I understand the reasons for the import restrictions in the current situation, but it must also be clear that if this continues to be the case in the future, it will not be conducive for both imports and exports.
Your Excellency, we are indeed grateful for all the support and empowering the local business community as well as the local vendors, especially during a situation where the world and the individuals are affected by the pandemic. So yes, there are other social issues and governmentally things that we need to resolve. But having all of that, thank you so much for your support. And we also know that there is a few ongoing projects, like development projects happening in Sri Lanka that is being done by your government. Could you please elaborate on that as well?
Yes, absolutely. We used to be, as I would say, a big development partner of Sri Lanka. And especially after, even during also, but after the conflict, we extended a helping hand to help rebuild Sri Lanka. As Sri Lanka developed further and became a middle-income country, this development relationship has changed. But we still have projects in Sri Lanka to support the economic development and also of course, the prosperity of the people. And when you think of the Netherlands, we already discussed it, many people think about water. We have had many projects and still projects in water and water management in Sri Lanka. I think about water monitoring, but also water distribution and purification, but also agriculture related, like irrigation. But there's more than water. We are using our engineering knowledge to build bridges in Sri Lanka. And yeah, when I heard bridges, I was like, well, yeah, bridges, what, how interesting can it be? But then somebody told me how important it can be on different levels. Of course, economically, because the infrastructure is better and roads are shorter, but also for the security of school children, for instance. They can take a shorter route, a more safe route. So there are many aspects to bridges that I didn't think of. Besides that, we are building hospitals in the north. So there are several infrastructure projects as well that we're working on in Sri Lanka.
So on this note, could you say that the bilateral relations that Sri Lanka and Netherlands is having, could we term it as excellent at this moment?
Absolutely, yes. They are excellent, and but I'm also very ambitious, so I always see room for more. Here, I think there are some areas that we can look at. The one I already mentioned extensively, making our relation more future-proof, more sustainable. Well, I won't have to go into that again, but there we see a lot of possibilities. And then also we really want to work with Sri Lanka on cultural heritage and see how we can make it more of an experience, but also of educational value for both people in Sri Lanka, school children, students and tourists, but also tourists from the Netherlands and from other countries. So they're of course related to the Dutch period and the Dutch heritage that we see in Sri Lanka. Yeah, I think that's an area we can make sure that Sri Lanka becomes an even more attractive destination for Dutch people.
So, Your Excellency, we are indeed grateful for all the support, all the effort that you're taking in strengthening the bilateral ties between the two countries, as well as supporting Sri Lanka when and wherever it's needed. Having said so, is there some sort of an encouragement or a motivational thing that you would like to share for the youngsters or anyone who aspires to take up diplomacy as a career?
Absolutely. I think if you have passion for the profession, you have to get prepared and go for it. That's what I would say. It has many aspects. It's enriching, it's fascinating, but you need to really want it to do it, because there are challenges and you have to make sure that you can overcome them. But it's a beautiful profession.
Definitely. I suppose that diplomacy and serving a country gives you, the gift that you get is self-satisfaction at the end of the day. And if you really do it with your heart and you serve nations and people, at the end of the day, you can be happy that you're doing everything possible to make a world a better place to live. So, Your Excellency, we're indeed honored, privileged once again to have you with us today as our diplomatic face. And we would like to wish you and your family all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you.